For centuries, one single word has had this profound impact on gender roles, on family structures, and power dynamics for literally millions of people. It's a concept that comes from a verse that is both foundational and, for a lot of people, really controversial. So today, we're going to unpack the meaning of Qawamah. Right. This is the verse at the heart of the whole discussion, Surah An-Nisa, verse 34. And that phrase, men are qawamun over women, has so often been translated and understood to mean that men are the guardians, the protectors, or even rulers who have authority over women. But is that translation really the whole story? I mean, what if the key to this incredibly powerful concept is actually hidden in the nuance of the original Arabic? Let's dig into the linguistic roots and the conditions the verse itself sets out, and just see what kind of picture emerges. So the traditional view of this verse, it pretty much establishes a hierarchy, right, with men in a position of authority. But for many, this idea really clashes with the Quran's bigger message of justice and mutual respect. And that contradiction, well, that's exactly why this verse is still so passionately debated today. Okay, let's dive into the language itself, because this is where things get really, really interesting. The entire meaning of this verse hinges on the specific Arabic root verb that's used. So check this out. The verse uses the root kama'ala, which means to care for, to be responsible for. It does not use the similar-sounding root qawama, which means something totally different, to correct or to straighten something that's crooked. I mean, this is a critical difference. The word choice points directly to responsibility, not to control. And it goes even deeper than that. The word that's actually used, qawam, is an intensified form of the word. It implies someone who does something continuously, a great deal of it. So being a qawam isn't some static title you just get. It's an active, ongoing duty, someone who is constantly providing care and taking on responsibility. And here's the crucial part. The verse doesn't just make this statement and walk away. It actually gives two specific conditions that must be met for qawamah to even exist. See, it's not an inherent right of just being male. It's something that has to be earned. And here they are, those two conditions, taken straight from the verse. The justification for qawamah is based on two things. First, that God has graced some over others, and second, that they spend from their wealth. Now, these aren't just suggestions. They're absolute prerequisites. So what does that first condition even mean? Well, many interpretations suggest it's not about some inherent superiority of one gender over another. Instead, it's a reflection of the historical context. In that society at that time, men were typically the primary providers, so this verse is describing a functional division of labor based on the norms of that specific time and place. The second condition is even more black and white. It comes down to money. The role of qawam is explicitly tied to spending from their wealth on the family. You can almost think of it like a job description with a very, very clear requirement: you have to be providing financially. And this leads us to the real core question for today, doesn't it? If qawamah depends on who is providing for the family, what happens when those roles change? What if a woman is the primary breadwinner? Does the qawamah shift right along with that role? To even begin to answer that, we have to zoom out. I mean, no verse in the Quran exists in a vacuum, right? We have to see how this one idea fits within the Quran's entire, bigger picture of humanity. First off, the Quran establishes this core principle of universal human dignity. It says, we have honored the children of Adam. Not just the male children, not just a specific group. This honor is for all of humanity, and it establishes this baseline of fundamental equality. And when it comes to things like reward and value in the sight of God, the Quran is incredibly consistent. A good life and divine reward are promised to anyone who does good deeds, whether male or female. The deciding factor is your faith and your actions, not your gender. And this verse just lays it all out there. It's the ultimate metric. The text is so explicit, the only thing that makes one person more noble than another is their righteousness. It's not gender, not wealth, not your family name. This is the fundamental principle. So any interpretation of Qawamah that creates a gender-based hierarchy seems to go directly against this core message. Okay, so with all this linguistic and contextual evidence on the table, how does the understanding of Qawamah actually change? Let's put the traditional interpretation side by side with this more contemporary one. The shift is pretty profound, isn't it? It's a move from a fixed authority that's just based on your gender to a flexible responsibility that's based on your contribution. The whole model changes from this rigid hierarchy to a dynamic partnership, one that can actually adapt to our modern reality, where women are educated, they work, and they provide financially for their families. And contemporary scholars like the late Dr. Muhammad Shahrour have really championed this view. Their argument is simple. Qawamah is a heavy duty. It's not a privilege. And if you follow that logic, it means that if the duty of financial spending is shared, well, then the Qawamah is shared too. And if a woman becomes the sole provider, this interpretation suggests that duty can shift entirely to her. So what does this reinterpretation really mean for relationships today? Well, it fundamentally reframes the whole dynamic of the family. So here's the core takeaway. The focus shifts away from who's in charge to who's contributing. It reframes the entire dynamic from one of command and obedience to one of cooperation, care, and mutual responsibility. And this partnership view, it fits so perfectly with other Quranic metaphors for marriage, like the one where spouses are described as clothing for each other, implying mutual protection, comfort, and dignity. It's a model of reciprocity, not hierarchy. So, just by going back to the original language and looking at the context, a concept that was once seen as this rigid hierarchy can be understood as a flexible, dynamic partnership. And that leaves us with one last question to think about. What other deeply ingrained traditions might look completely different if we just took the time to re-examine them with fresh eyes?